Little box and the green one. Little box and the blue one. Box and the yellow one and the little and the box and the green one.
Growing up in the 90s gave me, and I would argue most of my female friends, some serious body image issues and lots of unhealthy relationships with diet and exercise. After some growing up and doing a lot of work to undo that damage, I was flashed back in an instant after watching the Netflix series America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. I am one of your hosts, Karen Horwitz, and today we are going to discuss the Netflix DCC series and why it's not exactly what you think. All right, hello and welcome to the You Can Call Me Karen pod, where we are going to be discussing events from the world around us in an effort to highlight our similarities rather than our differences. I am Karen Horwitz, and I am joined by my two dearest friends, Stephanie J. and Monika Rosa.
Hello.
For this week's episode on Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders and the themes of that series that they are not saying out loud. But before we get to the topic, let us check in with my co-hosts for your Who You Calling Karen stories. Steph?
That was good.
Thanks.
That was very good.
Yeah.
I keep trying so hard. It's not patronizing at all when you say that.
No, it really was. No, I mean, that came from a place of realness.
Why don't you kick us off?
Well, hello. Hi, everybody. I'm going to do my best to tighten it up because I've been told to tighten it up. So
What you said?
tighten it up. So, so first of all, something that I want to preface this story by saying that I teach at a school, and I feel like this could totally be a whole other episode, guys. But I teach at a school where it's like retake central. Okay, so like if students are struggling, then it's on us as the teachers to reteach, which in theory is great. But then what started to happen was like kids would just start to like kind of fail on the first try on purpose so that they could just get a retake, and it was just kind of like whatever. So I just want to preface this by saying yes, I teach in a culture of like our principals kind of say like, what are you doing to help students who aren't succeeding? So I've always got a plan for students who have not passed a quiz. So I get kind of frustrated when I'm like hearing from parents like, what happened here? Like, what do I do? And I'm like, I actually have to do everything. So I'm going to be doing a small group. I'm going to actually I have an actual makeup assignment I already have prepared. I have I already have in place all these things that I do to help kids who struggle. And again, I'm not talking about true strugglers. I'm talking about kids who. So anyway, to get to the point, I had a parent who was reaching out to me pretty often in regards to her daughter. But interestingly, this daughter was not a struggling student. Like she was getting high B's, low A's on all her tests, all on her own without any sort of like reteaching or anything. But her mom was saying that she was struggling. And I was like, am I missing something? So I was like zooming in, like watching her carefully. Like, and I'm like, man, I'm not seeing a problem. Parent-teacher conferences roll around. We have a meeting, and it was pretty uncomfortable because she kept saying how struggling her daughter was. And every teacher on the team was like, we're not seeing what you're seeing. And so we kind of quickly realized that this mom was overcompensating. And she was kind of expecting her to be the type of student that maybe she was as a child, as opposed to accepting her child for who she was. She is a solid B, low A student, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's great. Yeah.
That's really good. And so anyway, one week I have this weekly assignment that I give that gives some current content practice as well as practice on like previous topics. And basically, they get to try it all on their own. Most kids struggle with reaching back to old content. That's a skill in itself. And
Right.
so I do a review session every week over it. And then I started throwing in quizzes on Fridays that touch on the same topics that are on that weekly assignment. So if you try the assignment, don't do well, come to my help session. By the time the quiz rolls around, you should be able to get a couple questions right. Homegirl got a 10 out of 10 on her first attempt of the weekly assignment. So she didn't want to come to my, yes. So I was like, awesome. And so I was like, she didn't want to come to help session.
Right on.
Because she already got a 10 out of 10. Way to go. So she didn't want to come to help session because she had already gotten a 10 out of 10. Well, then a quiz rolled around on Friday over the same topics and she got 0. As in 0.
I'm sorry.
As in like, no,
Out of
she
how
got
much?
no one. It was like 10 points, 5 questions.
Damn. She got a
0 points. Yes. And so this is a quiz, like it doesn't go in the grade book. So like whatever. Mom sends this very emotional, like, I don't know what to do. I can't believe my daughter's having this experience. And so instead of writing her back, I called her and I was like, hey, Mom. And she was like, I'm like, how are you doing? She's like, I've been better. And legit.
Oh,
That's
jeez.
yes. I did. Yeah. She was like, I've been better. And I was like, okay.
This was the
So I was
mom?
like, that was the mom. The kid couldn't have cared less.
Of course.
Because it wasn't going in the grade book.
Right, because she lets her mom do her homework.
Mm-hmm. Well, I finally had to say it at the end of the call. I was like, I just want to point out that the quiz was over the same topics on the weekly review assignment that she got a 10 out of 10 on. And Mom finally it confessed because she was all like in teary-eyed, like, I just don't understand. She doesn't seem to be understanding like how are you teaching it? And then lo and behold, she finally admitted that she was
Oh my God.
Yes.
And so the kid did it.
Like 1 + 1 = 2.
Equals
lady.
2.
What's
Yes.
happening here? I am a math teacher.
Mind you.
So, it was just interesting because I felt like she was teary and wanting me to like, say that I was she was crying and being, so emotional. And lo and behold, she wasn't doing her daughter any favors by stepping in and doing it for her. So I thought that was very Karen-ish.
Wow. Yeah. That almost feels like some other like complex that should be in the like what's the like DSMV or whatever. Like that just feels like something else, like to not be able to make that connection of like I did my homework for her and then cry about it. That just feels, I don't know, so bizarre to me. And I was also thinking,
problem, it's me.
Yeah. Our guest is really going to appreciate that reference. Personality disorders. Yes.
I was going to say, what is DSMV or whatever you said?
It's like a book that that classifies all the various mental disorders that exist. And I
it has
feel
like a
this
list of symptoms, and typically if you are diagnosing someone, they have like a certain number of the symptoms in order to qualify for the diagnosis, if I remember correctly from my degree 3 million years ago.
No, that was great. You
forgot you had one of those. Yeah,
I had one of those.
And I think like before I get into my Karen, I want to say one, I taught in Virginia, I teach in New Jersey, and I think this is like a epidemic that's happening across the nation. I don't think that that's just to your district. I think our definition of success has completely shifted, where I teach undergrad students and getting a C is failing. Like literally that is that is written into the syllabus from the Department of Education that a C is failing for undergrad. And I'm like, excuse me, they are still learning how to deal with time management, how to balance their classes. Like, let them have a B and be proud of it. It is really hard to get a B in college, And so I just think the whole education system and grading scale system has really turned into this competitive nightmare. And I hope it changes, because then I don't want you to have to deal with stories like this again.
And I hope that it doesn't come off as like, I don't feel like I should help kids who are struggling, because that's not what I believe at all.
No,
But I
that's not
do
what it
feel
what
like
comes
I
off
there's
as.
good.
I
just
heard
do
that
feel like
it is
there's a pressure.
October. It's October.
And she's still trying to get,
We need to measure
acclimated.
growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to measure progress. And she's at a B. So by
Mhm.
June, if she's at a
Mhm.
B now, by June, she can meet the A. And here's how we're
Mhm.
going to get her there. But we got to start with
Exactly.
actually having her do the work.
Do the work. Yes.
Mhm.
Preach.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, that's one thing I can do. Okay. So my Karen story of the week.
Are you a preacher? Did I not know?
Oh my God.
I would
That's
come to
like-
that church. Just FYI. Yes, I fucking would.
Yes.
And to our
Hallelujah.
listeners,
She said,
I would not go to many churches. I'm just saying.
Karen's an atheist. No. Busted. We just lost
Saying
a
the
million
quiet
followers.
part out loud. Jeez. Oh, it was
Okay.
nice. It was fun while it lasted.
So my Karen of the week, I realized that we do a lot of Karens that are women, and I don't want that to be something that is assumed that only women have this characteristic of entitlement. So I want to bring an experience from what we call them Chads, I guess. I don't know the name, the
Someone
male
told me
equivalent,
it's
but
not Chad, but I like Chad. Let's go with Chad.
okay.
Mhm.
For
I
the
like Chad.
purposes of this podcast, we're going to call them Chads. So,
And we'll take votes afterwards of what that name could be.
yes, tell us in the comment section
Mhm.
what you think the name is. So a couple years ago, maybe last year, we were flying, and I had Millie. I was sitting in a seat next to Millie, and Brielle, she sits by herself now, and Luke and Miles sit together. And so Millie, before the flight even took off, was like trying to get situated and kicking this guy's chair in front of us.
Uh-oh.
And this, and this
Chad.
guy, this Chad turns around, not to me, but to my then
Oh, no.
5 or 6 year old daughter, and is like, excuse me, do you mind letting your mommy know? Yes.
Oh.
That like it is not polite for you to kick the seats of other people in front of you.
Oh my God. Did
Was
he talk like that?
Yes. I was
Oh.
enraged. I was enraged. I was like, we got it. You need to turn around. I really wanted to be like, excuse me, I'm sorry. Are you a 30-year-old man traveling by your fucking self? On this flight? Shut the fuck up.
And Manny gets kicked off the plane.
And now I'm the Karen. But really? My goodness. Ugh. Turn around and don't talk to my daughter or address her. Lord have mercy. So that's my
Everybody
chat.
knows that the plane etiquette is when a child is behind you, you in your head curse them out the entire time and you don't say anything out loud. Everybody knows those are the rules.
Those
So
are the
Chad,
rules.
Sit down and shut the fuck up.
Seriously, sorry, bro. Like you're not the lucky one today.
You lost the seating lottery. Now,
You
airplane
sure
Chad,
did.
be quiet.
Yep.
On that note, all right, those are your Karens and Chads for the week. We will be accepting votes for the best male Karen name. And now let's dive right in. All right. So for this 2-episode series, we are going to focus on DCC, the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. And we are joined, for those watching, you got a sneak peek. We are joined by our dear friend, Erica Butler. She is the owner. Hey, Erica. Welcome. Erica is the owner of Aligned Nutrition. She is a dietitian who specializes in eating disorders and intuitive eating. And in addition to all of her accolades, she is also a Buckeye alum. She's an Ohio State alum. We all went to school together. We all danced in college together. And so this topic is near and dear to our hearts for so many reasons. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the OHIOs that are happening on my screen.
OH!
Man, we are alienating so many listeners. We're getting rid of like Michigan fans today. We're just like, sorry, please keep listening. So this week, we will begin unpacking this Netflix series on the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. As former dancers ourselves, we have certainly all taken an interest in this series, and it has resurfaced a lot of things for us regarding not just the dance, but body image, diet and exercise, feminism, and so much more. So this week, it's a lot to unpack. This week, we're going to focus on the themes around body image, physical appearance, unrealistic expectations. Next week, we're going to dive into some of the deeper undertones of the show that surround the role of the coaches, the sexualization of the dancers, and certainly the contradictory religious themes versus like wholesome Southern culture thing that's woven throughout. So for this week, let's dive right in and let's get initial reactions from you all of, what came up for you when you were watching this, what did you notice, or what didn't you notice, maybe based on what I've teed up here. And Steph, I think you watched it most recently, so let's start with you.
Yeah. So it was weird because I was watching it through the lens of watching the dancing and realizing it's a style of dance that we didn't do like on the dance team. I didn't grow up doing anything like that, I guess, and very like sexy and flashy. And so I was just kind of intrigued by that because the dancers that audition to be Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders are so talented. And have like this like amazing backgrounds and they now, yes. And so I'm like, it's just, I was intrigued by the fact that it's such a competitive team to make and you have to have all these skills. But at the end of the day, not a lot of those skills are showcased. Yes, they have the high kick and the split, but like the movement doesn't lend itself to, do you know what I mean? So I was kind of taken by that a lot.
Impression.
And then I was also, and then of course, what, the triggering thing, I wasn't really that triggered except for the story of the dancer Victoria, who I know, who like ended up taking a year because of having an eating disorder. And the season that she was back, what set me off was the meal that she had that on screen, and it was like the rice cake, the watermelon, that's like set me off because it reminded me of just my issues with my body, and like things that I had done and to try to lose weight or be smaller and all that kind of stuff, especially dancing. So so yeah, there was like some body image stuff that like conjured up for me, and then just as a dance teacher and thinking of these crazy talented, even some of the kids that didn't make the team, who were like bananas good dancers. And you're just like, what? Because they don't have a certain look. Like, this is off the charts.
Well, and even they were like, the coaches were saying that at a certain level they aren't picking the women that necessarily are the most talented dancer. It's like they're looking for the look at this point, at the point of them being at these auditions. So as former dancers, I feel like that's really frustrating because you're like, no, just take the talent. But your observations there are super interesting. Erica, I'd love for you to build on that a bit because you obviously work in this field. And so I'm sure what you saw was a little bit different than what we saw. So what kind of reactions do you have?
Yeah, it's interesting. I found the show to be endlessly complicated. And I think that what Steph introduced is this concept of there's so much about this organization that is tied to legacy, tradition that is still in the 1970s. And then so much I think they're proud of that they think they've evolved in, but in really a lot of ways they haven't. And so, with Steph, you saying about the dance, the level of skill and that not really being utilized. And maybe we'll talk about this later on, but the women who are in leadership and like, what are their qualifications? What are the judges' qualifications for choosing who is making the team? And so you're probably not surprised to know that as far as eating disorders, body image, that I was seeing some of the same themes. We talk about, they're not, I think they do a real show of saying, hey, we're not doing weigh-ins. They talk about at one of the practices, like food being fuel. Are you fueled? Are you strong? We're not calling people fat on screen, but we're talking about, the size of someone's thigh or their God-given height. There's so many interesting ways that people's looks are picked apart, things that they can potentially change and then things that they aren't. And so I think the way the docuseries is so well done. They just lead the viewer to make their own conclusions. I mean, it's almost poetic at times. And so I think that there is this presentation of, hey, we're evolved. We're here. We are talking about are these amazing athletes, and we're not subjecting them to some of these things of the past. But I think evolution would be making a uniform to fit the athlete, to not be required to fit into these objectified tiny uniforms. I mean, they're iconic, no doubt. But just, like you were saying, there's so many people that are so talented that are not making this team because we're saying it's about skill. We're saying it's about ick factor. We're saying it's the best of the best. But what we're not saying is it's about being a certain look.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, your point on the height, I remember there was like a point when they were making the final selection where they're like, at what point do we start making a height requirement? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to just cut out people because literally genetics? So like, where do you draw the line?
Not to like give them any credit in that, but like, and Steph, you might know this because you have a dancer who's like that, but the Rockettes, is there not a height requirement for the Rockettes?
There is a height requirement.
Yeah.
It's
so that's
the
industry.
There's a window. It's it used to be 5'7" to 5'10", but 2 years ago I believe they lowered it to 5'5".
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just because that's industry
line, right?
does not make
Because the
that.
kick line.
No, again, I'm not defending them, but I will say, I mean, I think, okay, so I'll give one, like, going in that point of like the talent is not represented on the field, in comparison to, we have to realize the football players who are like, imagine if if the Dallas Cowboys team was made up of football players who just had the look and like it wasn't the
Awooga.
It would be a very different game, I think.
It'd be a very different game. But like the fact that like for the cheerleaders, like the audition, I'm just thinking about like what I know about like football and the combine and like what those football players go through actually to make the team. And they tried to present the audition as the same thing. And they even did some things where they brought in outside people to be on a panel. But at the end of the day, it was the coaches who were making the cuts, And so, it just was so much like ambiguity in the audition process.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the outside people, like one guy makes the boots.
Yeah.
Like, what can you judge on dance talent?
Yeah.
Like, get out of here. Also, anyways, I'll leave it at that. Sorry, Manny, please proceed.
Okay. I don't know. Where were you going with that? Also, what? Tell us.
Nothing. Nothing.
Oh, you little tease. But yeah, I was just that's kind of where I was going to say is that like, the talent portion, it just is like, why is that acceptable to not accept the greatest talent in the dance industry, but in any other competitive sport, that's not the standard, you know? And so that, I don't know, it's just like a wondering, I guess, or question of like, when we're talking about industry, right? When we're talking about showbiz, right? And auditioning, you know, I heard that a lot growing up, right? Of like, sometimes you can just walk in, they'll look at your outfit and they'll say no. No, right? And so that I don't know if we'll ever really, I don't know what it will take to get the industry to get to a point where looks don't weigh so much more than talent.
That is conjuring up some stuff for me, just because, you know, as a dance teacher, and we go to convention and the kids audition for scholarships, and, you know, we encourage our dancers to, when they walk in the audition, make sure that you stand in the front, stand in the center, because in these convention rooms there's like 400 kids. It's like, what do you do to set yourself apart? When we're advising young dancers, we're like, you want to look cute, you want to wear bright colors, you want to, you know, so they can see, oh, that dancer in the yellow or that dancer in the green. So we tell them, like, dress in bright colors, you know, make sure your hair is neat and like all these things. Older kids, you want to look mature and like not, you don't want to look like wearing a big hair bow, and you want to look like older, and that kind of stuff. And so it's like, auditioning is all like so embedded in the dance community. Like, you're auditioning to be a ballerina, you're auditioning to be in a music video, you're auditioning, and always the dance community is like, there's going to be some appearance that you need, there's a certain costume that you're going to end up having to wear, and like, and I just feel like what DCC does is take it to the next extreme. Like, actually, this costume is going to be about this big, and you gotta like, you know, fit in it. And it's like they kind of are preying on a community that already has all these like rules about how you're supposed to appear and be in an audition. And like, we're telling them, like, you want to be the best dancer like you can possibly be. And but we remind our dancers that that's not always rewarded, which is is always frustrating. It's not always rewarded, even if you did a great job.
Yeah. I want to jump in on the, wait, Karen, do you want to tell the listeners something about me? Well, I didn't get to say my reactions.
What Manny is awkwardly referring to is she was a Cleveland Cavs girl back in the day. I think when we were in college, right?
Yeah, my senior year.
So obviously this one probably hits home for you in terms of just like all of the image and the look and everything. I'd love to hear, as you were watching it, did that give you memories of that time? Like, what was similar, maybe what was different? What's your reaction there?
I can kind of weave this in through some of our questions that we might have coming up. But the one thing that I did want to say that really stuck out to me, and Erica, it might have been you that was just talking about like the uniform and how like they sew and stitch the uniform to be like basically glued to your body, only for at the end of the season you to hang it up and never wear it again. Like that, for me, feels like the definition of emotional abuse, because you just spent your whole like year working for that uniform. That is what like the all of these girls, they said their earliest memory was the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader uniform. And then they make these remarks about your body, about your fitness, about your physique, so that you can fit in that uniform, only to take it away from you at the end. So you have nothing to show for that you actually went through this whole experience. And that, I think, is what triggered me the most, because that's what happened to me on the Cavs, is that I had to return everything at the end of the season, and there was nothing to show for that I had met. This is like for dancers, if anyone who's listening who's not familiar or friends with a dancer, this like going to dance professionally for an NBA or an NFL team is the highest, like Like some of us, that's like the highest that we can make it, you know? And so to not be able to like have any kind of legacy to show my children that I did this with like the actual costume, it feels, it's like a
abuse.
heartache of mine. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think on the show, they talk about how these things are like actually crafted to these women's bodies. Like they are handmade for them individually. It's not like when they turn it back in, some girl next year is going to pick these up and wear the same thing. So it's literally just to like mentally fuck with them. There's no other explanation for, doing that. I don't get that.
Yeah. I don't think they're shy about presenting that you are giving over your identity. This becomes who you are, everything, your top priority. And then, when that is, and you're so busy, I mean, the schedule that these women hold, I really adored hearing the stories of each of the women and the grit and how they got there. And so, a lot of this is just really seeing them as part of this huge system that I hope can change over time. But it's like, they're so busy, they're so distracted, they're doing all of these things, all eggs are in one basket. You're done by the time you're 25. Like you said, you're a senior in college and you're hanging that uniform up. So I think there's just a lot of that short life cycle. It like, what do you do next? How do you move on from that? And just, it's just interesting.
It's something you just said there really struck me. So like you're asked to be you're asked to take on this identity, like as if you don't have your own personal identity anymore. Whereas you think about the contrast of like the football players, they have their name on the back of their uniform. Like they are individuals, they are paid a ton of money. And then these cheerleaders are asked to be DCC, like nameless, like fit whatever physical appearance that the coaches want of them. They change their hair color, they change their makeup, they change their whole like look. They put them in a costume that is the same for everybody with no like unique identifiers. It's fascinating. Like, what is that? Gosh.
But there's also a layer of exploitation even where, they have their social media that they're, that's part of the package is, and I know we'll get into this at our next episode more about like the pay and the deeper aspects of this, but just that they are using their name and likeness on their social media but that's almost an excuse for them to not be paid. So, like you were saying, this weird imbalance.
Yeah. So, shifting a little bit, I know, Steph, you mentioned in your initial reactions that meal that I think it was Victoria, right? That she was shown eating. And she had talked a lot about her struggles with eating disorder and her body image. And,
can I point out something about that?
Yeah.
Something I noticed in the show is they always said, anxiety, depression. And I don't know if the word eating disorder was ever said, but it was implied, which I thought was interesting.
About her specifically?
Yeah, it was more about her anxiety and depression. And I felt like the eating aspect was more implied, but it was never explicitly stated.
I didn't even
they never
realize
explicitly said that about an eating disorder.
But then they showed like photos of her like super thin, and then they and then they showed like people commenting like, you don't need to lose any more weight, but so it was very much implied. But
I think that was Netflix. I don't think that was the team. I think that was Netflix having to show receipts and have ethical principles because they knew the team would not.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. So like along these lines, I am curious to hear like Erica, your thoughts on more on this, like how they portrayed eating. You mentioned fuel, like that they talked about fueling your bodies, but I don't feel like we ever saw much fuel actually going into them. Like I don't recall much protein, many carbohydrates. Like you said, Steph, it was like a rice cake and watermelon or something that she was eating.
Rice cake, watermelon, some deli turkey.
Yeah. And I
yummy.
would like to, I think like we have a really great opportunity right now having an intuitive eating specialist on here. Like, I think along with that question, like, I'd want to know, like, how would you work with a Victoria if she came to see you? Like, I was struck by like what Stephanie was saying of like, she took a year off and then coming back, this is her meal, like what did she do during that year off, So I'd like to like hear some of your expertise of like working with the women that you work with, the young women that you work with. How would you work along somebody like Victoria in your work that you do, and share a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting, and I think part of our theme of this episode has been, this is the backdrop of our millennial girlhood. And I don't know about you, Steph, but what came up for me was, remembering reading Cosmo, and it was a supermodel of what I eat in a day. And so Victoria's meal was, way under what I would ever recommend for a meal, even a snack. Especially for an athlete.
gosh.
So to answer your question, Monica, this does come up a lot in the people that I work with where, kind of like we were talking about, this is the industry. I've worked with actresses, I've worked with the military, I've worked with gymnasts, I've worked with plenty of people that have an image focused career or sport that they're part of. So there is this, again, complexity of, maintaining something that is potentially false for you or maybe unnatural for you to achieve in your body. So your behaviors, what you're eating, how you're working out, how sustainable that is, that becomes a question. So if I was working with someone like Victoria, and I have, if it's something that is severe enough or unsustainable enough, we start going, okay, how important is this, being an actress or being a dancer to you? Because it doesn't seem that you're able to maintain this physique that is demanded of you in a way that's sustainable, AKA eating a realistic amount of food. And so, or amount of exercise that is sustainable, or even to take it broader, what impact does it have on your any co-occurring mental health or life or relationships? And I think with the DCC that, again, they're so upfront about this is your life, live, breathe, eat, move, whatever, that there's already so much sacrifice taking place on your relationships, your time, your energy, that, the idea of, molding your body to fit a certain way. So if I was working with someone, it would be really complicated. And that's why having this conversation with you guys is fascinating to me, because there's no real solution. It's more about looking at an individual. And so with Victoria taking a year off, I mean, gosh, yeah, I wonder, what kind of healing she did. It sounds like it was great for her, but then, ultimately she figured out when she came back, it wasn't, the dream that she had since she was a little girl. And so, but as a dietitian, I'd be looking at, how can you, sustain your body, for your sport. And so if you're maintaining that type of leanness year round, how naturally can you do that? I don't know.
I have a follow-up question to that in the complexity of Victoria, and we can talk more about Victoria. I had a question for our next episode, but like in the work that you do you generally work, I think you work with younger women, but maybe you could clarify that for our audience. And then also, like, one of the things that was, Victoria has a lot going on, but one of the things was her attachment to her mom's legacy. And so when you work with these young women, do you work with them and their parents, or is it strictly your client? Does it depend on the age? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, I think that relationship between Victoria and her mom was also a little bit of the cause of what,
because that plate
we
her
were
mom
saying.
fixed.
What'd you say?
That
Plate her mom
fixed.
fixed. Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yes.
It's interesting when we're looking at this kind of stuff, you are definitely unpacking your relationship to food, growing up, where you got certain messages about things, but we might also be looking at, biological things. So if someone was dieting frequently, or they had their wisdom teeth taken out and they couldn't eat very well, like there's a lot of things that can set off disordered eating and eating disorders. So it can be biological in nature, it can be stress, it can be trauma based, it can be more social learned, which I see a lot in sports and appearance focused sports. It can also be maybe more addiction, or kind of based in that pathology, or co-occurring with something like obsessive compulsive disorder. So usually we are looking at, if I'm working with someone, I don't want them working with me forever. I want them to have support and to create support. So if, depending on someone's age or their relationship or their desires with their support people, whether that's their parents, their family, their friends, we might be doing some psychoeducation of like, okay, mom, thank you so much for helping Victoria with her anxiety, depression, eating disorder, behaviors, etc. Here's what Victoria needs for breakfast, and giving her, it's maybe not a rice cake, maybe it's a little bit more turkey, maybe it's a sandwich, maybe it's a wrap, maybe it's something that's more calorically dense. And so that is often the dietitian's job, is to help that person figure out what actually does it take to sustain your body as a support. And then, whether somebody's body can, be stage ready or maintain that type of physique naturally. I don't know. It does. It becomes a question. I don't know any of the eating habits of any of the other girls, or, what it takes for someone to maintain that physique. I mean, certainly there are people that, we wouldn't just assume that everyone is maintaining that, through unnatural behaviors, but it's certainly not common for someone to be maintaining a very low body fat, year round, as a woman. So we look at a lot of other biological markers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, your comments about the relationship between Victoria and her mom, the relationship between like your patients or
clients, either one,
clients and their mothers when they're young. And then Steph, thinking back to your Who You Calling Karen stories, and like the relationship between yes, full circle. But like, right?
Yes.
That's a theme we've got to talk about sometime in more depth. But this, like, it feels like the intent, like the desire of the mom is good. They think they're doing the right thing for their child by, like limiting
their homework,
caloric intake, so that they don't get judged by society or whatever. But it's like, gosh, all of
did
this,
mom
like,
learn that being a cheerleader herself, or was it more genetically mediated? I don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly Steph's point of like the mom's doing the math, but the math looks different in 2024 than whatever year it was that the mom was doing the math,
Yeah.
And so like we need your daughter to learn how to do it.
Daughter needs to try it herself.
Yeah.
And she's her journey to understand is gonna be different than her mom's. And
I think that like kind of is like as like an overall like impression on this show is like the amount of interference that the adults have in these formative years of these women. It's like, what is the appropriate amount of interference in what is the appropriate amount of coaching, and what is the like toxic amount of interference? And I think that is like what I really struggled with, because I, again, being a dancer and having the background that we have in performance, like I understand to a certain extent. But some of it just felt like pure like control.
Yes. Control is a theme that was like in every step of the process for me in this show. And it's really upsetting. I also, I think we probably want to wrap up here soon, and we'll pick this up again next week. But one thing that just struck me, Erica, you brought up the reminders of reading Cosmo and in like your early teen years and stuff, which definitely came to mind. I also recall watching recently a Victoria's Secret. I don't know if it was actually about Victoria's Secret or if it was about Les Wexner, some documentary on Netflix, I think. And it covered all of these like images that were put out in the 90s that were just totally unattainable, like these women's bodies that were starved probably and also totally airbrushed. So it just set all of these unrealistic expectations. And that is like what is in all of our psyches now, all of us millennials, you know, that are constantly comparing our bodies to things that are just not even real, images that were never real in the first place. And yeah, it was wild to me that this was filmed last year, and it feels like such a dated mentality that I thought
Well, I'd
I
like
thought
to
we were mostly
challenge.
past.
I'd like to challenge that a little bit because, like, isn't that what filters are? You know, like, and you guys again are not on TikTok, but like the filters on TikTok completely change your look. Like, I
Yeah.
just saw a woman, and I can try to link this too, but I just saw a woman do a post, and it was a beautiful post, but it started out about like what your face is supposed to look like, and she's like, I just want to remind everyone, like, faces don't look like this, and she started with a filter, and then she took the filter off, and she's like, faces are supposed to have this, faces are supposed to have that, you know? And so, like, I mean, and not to challenge you in a way that like you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, it's transformed into something
it's
else
different
with like the
now.
filter for social media. You can completely just airbrush your face. You can give yourself eyelashes, and you can really catfish somebody with a filter.
Well, okay, so for the people who watch this every week, let's take off all of our filters now. Just kidding. Like, this is us looking good, you guys. Anyways, before we wrap for the day, I would
That's
love
great.
to hear if there was any confessions, any realizations, any aha moments that anyone had as we walked through the first episode on DCC.
I'd like to share one.
Yay.
As we were talking as millennials and thinking about these women who are these dancers in their early 20s, except for Anisha, she was 31. I wish she would have made it. I would have loved to see her story. But there are just some questions and things that you're doing at that age versus when you are older. And I don't mean to sound condescending at all. But there's just, I think, having lived through the times that we have, we can so clearly see, oh, this all has just shape shifted. And some things have evolved, but some things have really just shifted the terminology around. And I think we can only say that because we've lived through this, 20 years ago. So it's just fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, shape shifted. That's incredible. And Anisha, I can't believe we didn't talk about her and her age. And yeah, she was one of the ones that I was really rooting for. And I was thinking about that. This isn't my confession though, but I was thinking about that with the 90s. And Steph, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know growing up in a Jamaican household, like food was like, like food literally equal fuel, I would not skip a meal. So the food stuff didn't really hit me the way the 90s did. It was more the standard of beauty. And so talking about Anisha and like the very few women of color, like I was more triggered by how the 90s, mainly Erica, you worked with me when I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch. We just talked about how that article just came out, right? Like how Hollister, Abercrombie just portrayed the standard of beauty for us millennials. And what's that podcast that you recommended, Erica, to me? Be There in 5.
There in 5, yeah. Kate Kennedy's incredible.
Yeah, she does a great dissection of the standard of beauty through Abercrombie and Fitch. If you guys are listening and want to get more on that, but that is what like really stood out to me more than like the eating stuff, because that just wasn't a part of my experience. But growing up in a predominantly white space, having those images being forced in your face and not having a beautiful Black woman representation or a magnitude of beautiful Black women represented in your sphere of influence was something that really I struggled with growing up, and that was a challenge for me. So, and then my confession would be similar to our friendship episode. I have been wearing white boots this whole time. because I really,
Oh my gosh.
I'm
Let's do a
manifesting
jump
it, but I
cut.
want some Dallas Cowboy white
Oh my gosh. I don't
And
know
also,
how
you guys,
I feel about that.
you guys met me wearing white sneakers.
We did. We did.
Oh, that's a story for another day.
That's my confession.
Amazing. Well, Steph, I'm assuming no confession from you today. Everything you knew.
I don't think I have a confession this time around. I think what we talked about really hit on what I was like ahaing from the episode with the eating. And then I think the confession is like what you made the parallel with the over involvement of the mom and how we see that in other arenas. So I guess that would be mine. Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yay.
Well, for our listeners, please stay tuned next week for the second episode on Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. And please follow us on all of the socials and like and subscribe where you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening to another week.
See you later, Karen.
And the fox, and the green one, and the fox, and the blue one, and the fox, and the yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.